The river is a healer, the river is a sage. The river knows no end and the river feels no age. The river is a leader every single day. It's living in the moment and it always finds a way. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river calls me over, it's calling out my name. In the day and in the night I hear that river all the same.
It's a different world out here completely. You go 20 minutes down the road, any direction from the swamp, it's a city. You come out here, you can forget all of that stuff. You can see the stars at night. I mean, it's just one of the last great wild places in America.
Heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river is a traveler, always on the go. Oh, a river never worries if it's fast or if it's slow. River, take me.
If we are going to keep life on Earth, including human life, we have to protect and hold sacred large tracts of wildness for our own sake, because they provide natural processes that we cannot live without.
It's our responsibility, to stand up and to speak up about it and to let them know, find somewhere else to go. Not here, not in our swamp, not in the area that we want to preserve. We want it preserved. We want the animals that God created, that's placed there, to continue to live and enjoy this land.
When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole.
Some call it the land of the trembling earth. Some call it fearsome. Some call it sacred. It is the stuff of legend and song, ancient and ever-renewing, mythical, eternal, and fragile. It is the Okefenokee Swamp. The Okefenokee lies deep in the heart of South Georgia. At 438,000 acres, it's the largest blackwater swamp in North America, a designated wetland of international importance, a national natural landmark, and a gold-tier international dark sky park. It is also the mother of two extraordinary rivers, the St. Mary's and the Suwannee. Those rivers have shaped the human history and the ecology of the region. As goes the swamp, so goes its rivers. In short, the Okefenokee Swamp is without comparison. It is singularly rare and profoundly important. Every year, the Okefenokee Swamp records as many as 700,000 visits. They are the wilderness seekers and the dream weavers. They yearn for a place untouched by time, for stars undimmed by mankind's light. For the bellow of gators and the songs of night, they come and they leave forever changed.
And I've been down here quite a few times now in the swamp, and it's amazing how every time I come down here it's different. The sky's different, the water's different, see different wildlife, and it's just a really magical place. And you know, I also think about other places like Yosemite and Yellowstone. You know, it seems like every state has something really special. And when I think about Georgia, I think about the Okefenokee.
Well, one of my memorable experiences I had actually was a young adult. I went out there one summer for a canoeing trip and spent a lot of time on the water, taking a lot of photographs. And I always loved how reflective the surface of the swamp is and how you can see the sky in the water.
So one of the things I think that's interesting about the Okefenokee is that, like, if you're there and you get on sort of one of the observation towers in the park and you look over it, it actually seems more like Africa. It looks like you're looking over the savannah, which is completely wrong, you know, because the savannah is generally pretty dry, low rainfall. But you see this huge expanse of this low shrubby vegetation with some hummocks with trees and with some open water, and you're sitting there thinking, I should see giraffes and elephants running through here. It really is sort of visually a phenomenal place, but you have this wildlife that and this ecosystem that is really quite unique.
At any one given time, I mean, you can walk 30 yards out there, 30 feet out there if you'd like. You're going to see 4 or 5 different species of frogs. You'll see a ton of different fish. You know, speaking of fish, the Okefenokee sunfish. You know, it's an endemic species. It's a little tiny fella. You know, some of the plant life, the Sarracenia minor, the Okefenokee variant, right? It's an endemic species as well. It's a type of carnivorous plant. You know, 36 inches tall. It's a hooded pitcher plant. You know, they're found out here. Only found out here wild. So it's one of those. There's something for everybody, you know, from if you're a plant guy to the other side of it, you're a herpetologist, things like that. I mean, there's so much out here to actually be able to see.
In my opinion, you know, wilderness, in order to be true wilderness, needs wildlife. You know, I think people tend to think of swamps and wetlands as these buggy, damp, dank places, but in fact, they're very vibrant and alive. And you know, the Okefenokee supports thousands of species. It's not a barren wasteland, and it provides this incomparable human experience because it's still filled with wildlife. I mean, there are places within this swamp where there are more black bears and alligators and animals than there are people. There are places where people perhaps have never even ventured in the Okefenokee, and there are undoubtedly places in the swamp that still remember the presence of the red wolf, the Florida panther, and those places could still support those animals again.
Beneath those tea-colored waters of the Okefenokee are these layers and layers of peat, which is decaying vegetation. And something that's really cool about the peat is that it offers this window into our past. It has this uninterrupted record of our environmental conditions over 5 millennia. Which is hard to even wrap your head around. And so I think another thing that's really interesting about Okefenokee is just getting to go there and be a part of something that's so old, so vast, and so big, and kind of take us out of our day-to-day grind.
The swamp has always been something that I enjoyed since a kid. One of the things that I always looked forward to was going on field trips to the swamp. And in particular, they had a gator there by the name of Oscar. And this gator was just, it was so huge and so big, and all the kids, we just looked forward to going on those trips, you know, getting on the boats and riding through the swamp and getting a chance to, you know, really see natural history. And it's a blessing to have that in your backyard, so to speak, you know, that we had that in this area. And as a child, you don't know how rich that is. But I understand a lot more now being an adult about how rich that heritage is and what a blessing it has been for us to have the Okefenokee swamp here. So I've always enjoyed that, and I even live close to the swamp now, so it's always been great having that in our backyard.
I think that the farther you can remove yourself from human construction and the deeper you can allow yourself to ground, then I think that you hear things in the middle of Okefenokee Swamp that you don't hear anywhere else. So all that vast botanical wonder supports lots of fauna as well. There's so few words in the English language that can really describe a place so vast and so beautiful.
Mankind, too, have contributed to the tapestry of the swamp. Its oldest inhabitants were the Native Americans who occupied the area during the late Archaic, Woodland, and Mississippian periods of prehistory. As late as the 1700s, the swamp was a significant winter hunting ground for Georgia's indigenous Muskogee people. Native Americans weren't the only ones to seek out the mysterious great beyond of the Okefenokee. Escaped slaves sought safety there, and during the Civil War, deserters banded together on the swamp's islands. The swamp's tales are captivating. Its music reflects the twists and turns of the past, and its legacy is worthy of tribute. It is a land that one celebrates and protects and never risks or cheapens with the bulldozers of destructive greed. It is sacred. The Okefenokee shelters a vast mosaic of pine islands, cypress forests, and blackwater channels, and hosts an incredible array of wildlife. But like the species that call the refuge home, the Okefenokee itself is now endangered, as plans for heavy mineral sand mining come perilously close to its borders. The potential destruction looms over every living thing within and beyond the swamp.
And I think as human beings, we have lost our sense of purpose for what this world was created for. I think we think it was really created for us. And we can do with it as we please, but at the expense of everything else. So if we don't preserve it, then who's gonna do it? It's like we're waiting for God to do it, but he said, but I have given you that to do. That's why I put Adam in the garden. He had a job to do. So it's not for us to just enjoy it, but we're supposed to preserve it and take care of it. So when I think about the river itself and the Okefenokee Swamp and all the things, if you just think about all the animals and all the shrubs and everything out there, that body of water is feeding. It's immense, the purpose that God put in that, and for us to go out to destroy it. Like we have to do better about taking care of this world. It's like we want to make laws for it, but we don't want to govern ourselves as people. So we think a piece of paper is going to help us protect the world and stop all this global warming and all these things. Like, no, when we start to think about things in the sense that we need to think about them, then we can control these things and take care of these things ourselves. But we have to slow down, appreciate what's here, and realize that we can only destroy it. We can't create it. We can't rebuild it. We can't recreate it, none of these things. So I think it's all about us coming back to our senses as far as for what we are here and what we can do. And then just utilize it for what it's for, which is to go out there, appreciate what God created, and live amongst it.
Unfortunately, even though this is such a special place, it is also at risk. And what we're seeing right now is an Alabama company, an Alabama mining company, trying to get permits so they can construct, phase 1 of an 8,000 acre mine. And it's right next to the swamp. And it's on what's called the Trail Ridge, which is essentially the sand berm that holds the Okefenokee back.
Experts experts that have reviewed the plans for this proposed mine have said that there's a real concern that mining on Trail Ridge, right adjacent to the Okefenokee Swamp, could have irreparable consequences for the hydrology of Okefenokee, which has cascading effects. If you affect the hydrology, then you're affecting species habitat, you're affecting the fire regime, and you're also affecting places that people just love to visit and appreciate. And so really, if someone wants to go and do something that may affect this public resource that we all enjoy, they need to prove that they're not going to harm it. And right now, we don't have that proof. And so that's why folks are so concerned about Okefenokee right now.
So Trail Ridge is an old barrier island complex from a time when sea level was higher. And it's a very long barrier island that's bisected in several places by rivers running through it, one of which is the St. Mary's. But the formation of Trail Ridge essentially blocked the drainage of several small rivers that flow into the Okefenokee Swamp. And by blocking that drainage, backwatered that area and created the Okefenokee Swamp itself. So Trail Ridge is geologically not that old, but in terms of soil development, it's old. And the USGS has done studies of Trail Ridge that look at it, essentially the layering of materials in it. And that layering of materials and how it's set basically create the conditions by which that dam works. And so let's say you just dug out a whole bunch of that from one side to the other and replaced it with sort of loose sand that allowed water to pass through faster. Essentially, you could create a subsurface breach in the dam and allow water to move from west to east much faster. So if you change the hydraulic properties of Trail Ridge, at the worst case, you could essentially lower the water level of the swamp by allowing more groundwater to leave through Trail Ridge.
So the fear is that long-term operations will essentially compromise the Okefenokee's ability to sustain itself. And if that were to occur, it would be catastrophic for the wildlife, such as the alligators and the wading birds that depend on predictable seasonal fluctuations in water levels.
For me, there are just a lot of unknowns. I mean, there's been a lot of research done on the environmental impacts of mining. We know that anytime we alter a natural system, there is a disruption and it will change the character of the soil and the character of the water in that area. We just don't know to what degree, and there are just a lot of things that we don't know about the subsurface because frankly, we can't see into the subsurface. And so for me, I tend to sort of err on the side of caution, in particular at places like the Okefenokee Swamp, which is a national wildlife refuge. It's a very unique landscape that is home to thousands of species of flora and fauna and enjoyed by people from all over the world.
Twin Pines Minerals is, to be frank, a shrewd operator. They have a pretty large tract of land adjacent to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, and they've deliberately positioned their first mine, what they're calling a demonstration area, about as far away from the Okefenokee as possible while still being on their land. And this was intentional, this was deliberate, because they know that once they receive the first permits for this project, it'll be much easier for them to move increasingly closer to the refuge, at which point their long-term operations are expected to come within 400 feet of the swamp itself. So this is what we call, in the world of conservation, a Trojan horse. Twin Pines right now is trying to mine around 700 acres or so during the first 4 years, but in the long term, they want to mine roughly 8,000 acres, which for perspective is the size of about 6,000 football fields worth of land.
The importance of some of these areas, like as far as the refuge is concerned, this is a refuge, regardless of how many visitors we get a year. This is for the animals that's in the area, I'm going to be here. I work here. I'm going to come in and out of the swamp. I have the potential to go anywhere I want to in the world. I can make a house, I can buy a house, borrow, do whatever. The guys that live here, the animals that are actually inside of the swamp, they don't have that option, right? So in 1937, when this was proclaimed a national natural landmark, that's what Mr. Roosevelt meant, right? And again in 1974, with the designated as a wilderness area. This area is meant to be protected at all costs, right? According to the legislature and the executive order that Mr. Roosevelt signed.
But now it is all being threatened again. Former Secretary of the Interior Bruce Babbitt fought for the Okefenokee when DuPont threatened to mine in 1997. He stated, "Titanium is a common mineral, while the Okefenokee is a very uncommon swamp. It is a battle everyone had hoped would not arise again." The leadership of Twin Pines Minerals is already associated with discharging mineral tailings into wetlands and air quality violations. Now they have the Okefenokee in their sights, and the stakes could not be higher.
In probably about the 1990s, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, had a campaign about wetlands or wonderlands instead of wastelands. They had a poster about all of, and a big public education campaign about what all the good roles are that wetlands play. Some of those might include flood protection, right? So we've had a lot of rain this year, it so happens, in the southeastern United States, and so that these wetlands along the landscape are holding water in ways that if they weren't there, it would have all shown up in our human developed areas, and we would have experienced deeper flooding than we even did. From a hurricane's perspective, they baffle the energy of storm waves coming in, and they can minimize the impact of hurricanes. They're often referred to as the kidneys of the ecosystem. There's microbes, there's tiny critters that live in the soil, and they make a living in a different way than the organisms do here in a terrestrial upland forest. So they are able to take pollutants that might have made it into the waterways and transform them into other elements that maybe aren't so dangerous. And then of course there's the whole wildlife perspective, which is the obvious answer when you go to the swamp, and because you can see these things with your own eyes, both plants and animals. There's unique and rare plants often in these wetlands, and so many animals rely on wetlands for some part of their life cycle. Riparian areas, the area along rivers particularly, are used by neotropical migrants more than any other type of habitat on the planet. And the whole reason we have wetlands protection in this country is related to birds.
The Okefenokee isn't just a local, state, or national gem. It's an international treasure of great importance. What is needed is not the defilement of the land and the violation of resources, but the united will to enhance this tremendous asset with a sustainable vision that will benefit not only the swamp itself, but generations to come. Today, the Okefenokee Swamp supports over 750 local jobs and funnels $64 million into local communities per year. It continues to shape the lives of those within its formidable reach, both economically and culturally. It is a gift of immeasurable value.
I think that's very enriching to have that human experience for people to enjoy and immerse themselves in. And frankly, entrusting that experience to the mining industry would be madness. We wouldn't put an industrial mining complex on the edge of one of these world-renowned habitats. We wouldn't put it on the edge of, say, a museum of fine art. So why would we do it on the edge of the largest blackwater wetland remaining in America? We shouldn't. This place is too special. It offers too much for people and wildlife, and we can do so much better.
But right now they're able to mine their starting proposal without any federal oversight, no federal wetland permitting, and there's no requirement for replacing or mitigating the wetlands they're going to destroy. And It's about a third of the property area that's actually covered in depressional wetlands.
The Okefenokee's influence extends far beyond its borders, directly impacting 2 states and many counties. The St. Mary's River is born deep within the swamp and travels over 125 miles to empty its waters into the sea. The Suwannee River makes the 246-mile journey to the Gulf of Mexico. These rare blackwater rivers have shaped the history, culture, and economy of the entire region. If harm befalls the swamp, the rivers too will pay the price.
When we think about the science of wetlands and flood protection and water quality improvement and habitat, is that there's the human element, and lots of people like to visit wetlands. And so there's also an economic benefit to protecting certain areas of wetlands. Folks come just to enjoy nature. Some wetlands allow hunting and fishing, and those are income sources for many states. In fact, my colleagues in the wildlife and fishery side get a lot of their research dollars from support from hunters and fishers who are able, whose some of the taxes on ammunition and other such things are earmarked and then have to go back into improving that. So there's definitely an economic benefit to having these wetlands. And if you're not a hunter or a fisher, they're beautiful places to visit. The Okefenokee is a beautiful place to canoe or kayak. The bird watching industry, brings an enormous economic benefit from wetlands all over the globe. And in some parts of the world, when you talk about wetland conservation, all they're talking about is birds, right? So birds bring a lot, and wetlands attract birds.
Because of its uniqueness and beauty, the Okefenokee is being reviewed as a potential World Heritage Site.
To get onto the World Heritage List, you have to have outstanding universal value. I mean, that is just kind of a breathtaking statement to say about something, and I think it really fits for Okefenokee. Joining the World Heritage List is an honor and an opportunity. It imposes no management restrictions on the property, but rather enhances the drive to protect Okefenokee like the treasure that it is. Joining the World Heritage List can also have a lot of benefits for the surrounding communities as it draws in visitors and scientists who wish to enjoy and study the amazing ecosystems that Okefenokee has to offer.
Throughout the ages, many have tried to capture the Okefenokee's magic in word, art, and song. In the centuries to come, many more will take up that challenge, but only if we stand guard, only if we protect this particular paradise.
It's almost mythic. It's iconic in the American imagination. But when you think about Okefenokee Swamp, you don't think about icons. But you get out there in the middle of it, and you're in the middle of a mythic, iconic American landscape.
We try to preserve it because I have grandchildren, I have great-grandchildren, and I want them to appreciate, what we have been blessed to have.
I think it's really crucial that we protect these environments now, because when they're gone, it's too late. And I don't want to have that hurt going back to them. I want to go back and be excited and see beauty and wonder in nature and show potentially my kids that beauty and wonder in nature.
The Okefenokee Swamp, a place of mystery and magic, of astonishing diversity, legend, and beauty. And now, once again, it hangs in the balance. It is a beating heart that calls to us all. This time, the threat is Twin Pines. Last time, it was DuPont. Who's next? And why must the battle be fought over and over again? It's time to ensure that this astonishing gift of wilderness will be forever free from harm. To learn more about the Okefenokee, the proposed mining venture, and the Okefenokee Protection Alliance, visit www.protectokefenokee.org. And please submit your comments about the proposed titanium mine to the Georgia Environmental Protection Division at twinpines.comment@dnr.ga.gov. Tell them no and tell them why.
The river is a healer. The river is a sage. The river knows no end, and the river feels no age. The river is a leader every single day. It's living in the moment, and it always finds a way. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river calls me over, it's calling out my name. In the day and in the night, I hear that river all the same. It's calling me over, calling out my pain. Oh, a river gathers tears just like a river gathers rain. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river is a traveler, always on the go. Oh, a river never worries if it's fast or if it's slow. River, take me to where I need to go. Oh, and I will just relax and let the river flow. Water heal my body, heal my water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole.